Yeah, I have to.
Discussion.
Yeah.
You got the discussion.
Discussion is the one that gives you a speaking list, eh? So in actual fact, that's the only one, other than when I vote, that's the only one I should have on, eh? Because everything else is in front of me, yeah. And I can watch the football on this one, can't I?
Yeah, absolutely.
If the Mayor could decide where he's going to sit.
No, it's just
A bloody coup. Uneasy, was it uneasy rests the head that wears the crown or something?
somebody's going to piss up for the...
I saw you on the TV this morning, you media hog. Okay, welcome everyone to the Finance Committee meeting of the Tuesday the 23rd of May 2017. You'll note that I said the year then. First item we have is apologies. I have an apology from Jeff to be leaving a little earlier in the... Apologise for my phone being on also. An apology from Jeff. I haven't received any other apologies, and I see... okay, so Count Philip and everyone else is here. All right, so I move apologies. Paula, thank you. Those for and against, thank you. Confirm the agenda. I move the agenda. Mallet, Bunting, those in favour, those against, carried. Are there any direct declarations of interest? There are no declarations of interest, thank you. I understand we have no speakers for the public forum unless there's someone at the back there who would like to come up and say a few words. Come on, give it a go. All right, we'll pass on that. Okay, first item on the agenda is the Finance Committee meeting of the open minutes of the Finance Committee meeting of the 11th of April 2017. I'll ask someone else to move this. I was not present, so James, thank you, and Rob. Are there any errors or any comments about the minutes? All right, I'll move the minutes. So we've got James and Rob. We got all that? Okay. Those in favour, those against, carried. Thank you. Item 6 on the agenda is the 10-year monitoring report, page 16. I'll hand over to Tracy, or who does this one? Tracy. Tracy. Thanks, Tracy.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to present to you the 10-year monitoring report as at the end of April, which, as the Chair pointed out, is on page 16 of your agenda today. Council's operating results continue to be favourable against budget. Our year-to-date surplus is sitting at $43.1 million, which is $33.4 million better than budget. This favourable variance continues to be due to unrealised gains from our interest rate swaps at $17.3 million, vested assets revenue, which are now $5.3 million above our year-to-date budget, and revenue associated with capital projects at $4.7 million above our year-to-date budget. Council's balancing the books measure has increased to a surplus of $14.1 million. This is $11.5 million favourable to the year-to-date budget. This movement of $4.5 million from the February results is largely due to the high revenue received in the area of our development contributions. On page 22, we have the risks and opportunities schedule. This has been updated to reflect the capital projects offsetting the Western Rail Trail that was mentioned at last month's meeting. The new item for this month is $26,000 for the One Victoria Trust. The Eastern Bulk Water Main is also a new item on the R&O, as well as being an emerging item today, but there is a paper on that being presented later on this morning. The Hamilton crematorium item we had in last month's emerging items is still being investigated and scoped, and further information will be provided to Council when that has been completed. In terms of debt, Council's total overall debt as at the end of April 2017 was $359.1 million, which is $45 million less than our year-to-date target of $404.1 million. Our 12-month rolling debt to revenue ratio is currently sitting at 171%, which is below our annual target of 205%. With regards to the compliance to our Treasury policy, we have breached that by 1% around the funding maturity of the 0 to 3 years in the month of April. Excuse me. This was due to us waiting until the 10th of May to take advantage of the favourable bond tender that LGFA released. Because of this, it resulted in a lower borrowing cost for us to do that. I also just wanted to restate on page 67, on point 67 on page 23. The favourable movement is actually due to the increased market interest rates over the 10 months of the current financial year. So market interest rates are still lower than Council's average swap rate, which is why we still have a $30.2 million liability on the balance sheet. But during the year, obviously the market rates have been increasing, which is why we're getting that favourable swap variance come through.
Which paragraph are you talking?
So point 67 on page 23. So in terms of capital expenditure, our total spend for the 10 months ended 30th of April is $57 million. This is $13.1 million behind Council's year-to-date budget. Management have identified 25 projects with a value of $19.6 million that are potentially not going to be completed by the end of June 2017.
Tracy, could you just slow down a wee bit and give page, have you got page numbers on your notes there or not? Okay. Okay. I'm just trying to find the pages you're onto in that.
Oh,
right,
sorry.
okay.
I'm just summarising the whole report.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
Yep. $7.2 million is due to reliance on a third party. $4.8 million are under contract with a supplier but have been delayed. And $7.4 million are for other reasons such as a change in priority or waiting for seismic results, etc. So the full list of those can be found on page 20, which is point 43. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, Mark.
Probably very simple questions. I'm presuming going on page 22, the table at the top there, risks and opportunities, etc. These were unbudgeted that we've put in since I'm taking it.
Yes.
The additional zoo staff, how long does that stay unbudgeted for?
So that was a paper that came through this year, so we have put that into the annual plan.
This financial year?
So it'll just be on risk and opportunities for this financial year,
right.
And we've picked that out, and that was one of our items that we presented as part of the annual plan to include in next year's budget.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Rob.
Yeah, I've got a couple of very simple questions too. First one, you mentioned about the Treasury management breach. And I understand how that occurred because you've explained that. Should we be reviewing our policy around Treasury management, given that around about this time each year we have a breach, a minor breach? I know that the reasons are often different, but you know, they seem to occur each year, and perhaps it might suggest that our policy needs a review.
That's completely up to you to review that. The reason why this particular breach has happened is this is the first lot of our lending that we've taken out with LGFA. So I had $65 million that I've had to manage.
I understand,
so,
it was a completely logical reason for doing that.
Sure.
But it's just a question of whether our policy is robust and functional, or whether we perhaps need to have a look at it and see whether it needs to be tweaked.
If I can help, Councillor Rob, the policy has quite broad guidelines to account for the different scenarios that could happen. PwC and the staff have operated well with that policy. It has aided us in terms of dealing with market situations and doing the best thing for council. So my recommendation would be that it is in. It's a good policy. Policies do get reviewed on a regular basis, and so the next time that policy comes up for renewal, we can review that. And in fact, I don't think it was that long ago when we took a look at that policy and found that it was adequate for us to provide enough leeway to be able to deal with council business.
Yep. Okay. No, that's fine. I'm happy with that. The second question is around paragraph 58 about the Hamilton crematorium, and you've given us an explanation in your summary that work's still being done on that. You do say, though, in paragraph 58 that this item has been moved to risks and opportunities report, but I couldn't see it in the risks and opportunities
No,
report.
it's not. So we were going to put it there, but then since then there's been some more work done and it's been moved out.
Okay, so that's a work in progress then, and
Correct.
it will presumably end up in the risks and opportunities once we've got a value to put on it, perhaps for the next meeting, or is that?
Yeah, maybe I can just clarify that. So in the draft annual plan, there was $600,000 put into that, which you'll be deliberating on that in the next few weeks. Since the draft annual plan was put out for consultation and in line with what Tracy was saying, we've been carrying out further investigations. That was some rough order costs. It's one of those investigations where we have to rip off walls and things like that, and the more we look, the more we're likely to find. So we're just making sure that when we come back to council that we've actually done a lot more detailed investigation and then potential design for the remediation work to give you the absolute full Monty with a lot better estimates than rough order costs.
Thank you. Okay, and my last question is around the deferrals in paragraph 41, where you state that there are 25 projects that will not be completed this year. Of those 25, how many have been started? I sort of read into that they won't be completed, but I assume that a number of them have already been started?
Yes, that's correct. There's actually probably a mixture of some of them. Some of them won't be started, for example, like the aquatic facilities and those sorts of ones, and founders won't be started.
Okay.
But there are various other ones that sort of are either halfway through or have been started and just won't be finished within this financial year. So that's why we need the money to carry over to the following year.
Okay, so perhaps can I suggest in future reports you give us, if it's possible, identify the numbers that have been started?
Sure.
And what the value is of the started ones that won't be completed and the ones that haven't been started.
Sure.
Because, you know, one can understand that there can be reasons with the project having been, with the work having been started, there may well be some valid reasons why it won't be finished, but at least we're on the journey with those ones.
Not a problem.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Jeff? Oh, you pulled the plug, have you? Well, don't feel obliged.
7, and I was just
Okay,
reading
sorry.
that. Sorry, paragraph 57, page 22. I was about the Central Library. I was reading that and trying not to be alarmed, where it
So
says
paragraph is what? 52, Jeff?
57, where it says remedial works to bring the building up to standard range between 600k and 3.9 million. Now I understand. I know this is coming back to a meeting shortly, which is why I was going to ask it. But Lance, can you shed any light on that? It looks a bit alarming at first sight.
The lower figure range is to bring it up to 33%, which is the legal requirement.
Oh, okay.
The higher is to, if council wants to go further and to make it more than 66%. And I think in the item that we brought back recently, the staff recommendation in line with our policy was that to bring it to 34%.
Okay.
But as you said, we will be bringing this back to a briefing then, to an agenda item just around the wider picture around
the libraries,
libraries and facilities and that sort of thing.
No, that's cool. I was just checking that something new hadn't fallen out.
Sorry to alarm you.
Still quite early.
We're here to be alarmed, Lance. You done, Jeff? Yeah. Okay, Angela.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I just wanted to tease out a little bit on page 20, the deferrals on point 43. And as an example, and support what Councillor Pascoe is requesting, that 2/3 of the way down, the water model, and that's obviously is being deferred because it's a council decision and delay to our final position on that. And that work's partly been done because that water model, there's 514 there of deferral, but that's $1 million if I recall, so that's being started. Can you just, I was unaware that that was capital. So this is all of the work around whether we go for a CCO or not, isn't it? No, it's
No.
not. Okay, so what water model? What is that then?
So through the chair, the water model is our hydraulic model that helps us determine, whether we can give water to developers and how we operate our water system. It's a bit like the transport model for transport. We've got a hydraulic water model which is essential for understanding how we grow and how much water we can give and which part of our network and how we give water to various developers.
So is it? So it's not infrastructure. It's not things.
Yeah, but it's very related to growth and building things. It's a tool that we need for designing.
So it is capital.
Yep, it's my understanding. So Tracy can probably answer that better than I can.
Yes, it is.
It is capital.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Okay, so on, can you just give me an example then? And this is the first time that you've split the deferrals into capitals, and 25 projects. That's 5 up on the last report. So it's becoming I know that the chair's often talked about deferrals, and some of us, others around the table have. It's becoming a bit of a tsunami, I feel. Our capital projects for this year expenditure was 100 million, and we just seem to be quickly falling behind. Can you just give me an example from the list on page 20 of a delay, an actual delay from one of those things that a third party is causing us?
So maybe I can start if you look at the Rotokauri growth. So we've got a number of projects in there. So they're all interrelated and they all come back to the same issue. So it's our program of works to work with developers to grow in the Rotokauri area. So the first one, as an example on the line there, is increased capacity of network throughout the city. That's installing our far western wastewater interceptor, so our big wastewater pipe on the far western side of the city. So it's about a $7 million contract, and we've let that contract. So that's an example of what Councillor Southgate was asking, I think, or someone about an indication of projects have started. So we have started that project, but we were delayed in the start because of land acquisition. So it was very important for us. Well, we needed to get access to the land to put the pipe in. So we've had protracted discussions with the landowner, and we haven't done that in the timing that we assumed when the funding was budgeted. But we have landed it. It's a little bit late, so the project's been delayed, and there's a knock-on effect to all of the other little projects in there as well. So all of those projects under Rotokauri growth are related to that. There's 2 land issues. That's the main one. The other one was purchase of the Wintec land. Okay,
so by the explanation of the third party, you're saying there's nothing that we can do because we are completely reliant on third party, whether that be owners of land who aren't happy with the deal we're giving them.
Typically, it's land, and there's a lot that we can do and we do, and that's negotiating and talking to landowners and trying to purchase land on or access on a willing purchase, willing buyer status. There's a lot we can do, but at the end of the day, we are reliant on a third party coming to the table. The other big third party issue is just timing of development. So we make assumptions when we do our 10-year plan of when developers will be ready to do things, and the market is always changing and developers' timing is always changing, so a lot of it is to work with developers and match their timing.
Are we being conservative in our assumptions?
We put a lot of work every year into reassessing our assumptions, so we're doing it right now as a team for the coming year in the works program. So we're, a lot of those assumptions were made 2 years ago when we did the 10-year plan. So we're re-looking at the moment. I expect when we come with the 10-year plan, we'll declare to you some of those assumptions that are wrong, and we probably won't spend money and have a process to deal with that. But we look at it every year in terms of updating those assumptions.
The second explanation, contractual, and that's deferrals of 4.8 million. Basically, the explanation there is a delay in contract. So can you just give me a very quick example from that list of one delay in a contract there?
So if you drop down to my Peacock's growth area, so you've got a couple of projects there in the contractual. So this is related to our preparatory works for Dixon Road roundabout, moving into Peacock's stage 1. So we have let the contracts now to start doing the design work and the preparatory work, but we've let the contracts a little bit late, so we won't spend all of that money in 1 year, but the contracts are let, and without the figures in front of me, we're probably going to spend half of our budget, and we need to push half into next year. The reason why we're late is, once again, land issues and working with developers and trying to time with developers. But we've put it in that contractual one because it was in our hands when we let the contract. We just decided to wait until some of the negotiations were advanced before we did it. And also, I think there's been a push to go fast on Dixon Road, so we pushed the button to do the preparatory work ahead of what we thought we would.
Okay, and just a very basic question. We don't raise our loan, we don't raise our debt to do capital works until the spade goes in the ground, to put it absolutely bluntly. So there's 19.6 million deferrals expected to be carried from this year to next year. I mean, you'll wrap that up in the next 2 months for the end of or the next 1 month and a couple of days for the end of this financial year. But we don't draw down debt until we press the go button, right?
That's correct. So when I'm doing my forecasting, I take all of those deferrals into consideration.
Yeah, because there's been a lot of conversation and comments over the years around, yes, there's concerns with deferrals, but it actually isn't impacting financially until we press the go button on a project.
Angela, can I just ask Tracy to, and we've discussed this before around the table, about the phantom capital project we have, which is our best effort, our staff's best effort to try and assess how much of our deferrals would have been debt funded, but because they didn't go forward, we didn't need to have that amount of interest charged to the ratepayers. So, do you know what is the value of that phantom capital project?
So the value for this financial year that we're in, that affects your interest costs and depreciation, is $10 million. And we're just reassessing what number I use for the annual plan, so the budget for next year, because obviously we're already at 19, so we're just going back and reassessing that number and rolling that through our numbers at the moment.
So this is not a precise science,
no.
But the effort is to try and make some effort to adjust our budgeted interest rate charge.
Correct. Because in plain English, we have rated for this current financial year off the ratepayer $10 million to cover the interest of the projects we were supposed to have done. That's right, isn't it?
No, we haven't rated them for it.
Sorry.
Yeah, we haven't rated them for it. So I've taken off and taken out of depreciation and taken out of the interest costs the fact that we won't go ahead with $10 million worth of projects.
Yeah. Cool.
But in actual fact, that if we, in hindsight, it should have been $19 million. Yeah, no, I'm not. Like I said, it's not precise, but in hindsight, that's what it would have been. Just to get your head around what the impact of it is.
So that's why you see a favourable interest in a finance cost. That's why that's so favourable.
Okay. Just page 20 down the bottom under H3 projects. At the last meeting, we were asked to bring 200,000 from, I think it was, sorry, I'm looking at CE 10048, the renewals. We were asked to bring forward 200,000 from 18 and 19 into this year, and now you're pushing half of that out again. I mean, material-wise, it's not a lot of money, but only 2 months ago we were asked to bring it forward, and now you're saying we've got to push it back again.
It's not. Sorry, through the chair, it's not for the same project. That project for $100,000 is a contractor delay in a new lift to go into the Seddon Park building, and so it's a different project.
So I thought that whole 200,000 was something around.
It was around Seddon Park in terms
stuff.
of that's correct, but it's a different line item.
Okay, but it now has to be deferred. Okay, I think. Do you want to just? I just got one question on the rest of the pages, or do you just want to stick with it first?
Is it within this item? It
is this item, yeah.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah. Just on page 41, community support, I'm looking at the activity, and for the year, it's year to date so far is a deficit of 3.8 million. Just the line, and this will be to Lance, the third line down, revenue from activities.
I've got a big highlight on that.
Yeah, we've got actual year to date 79,000, and last year to date was 1.4 million. Are we suddenly? Is it housing? Is it?
I think. But ask.
Is it housing?
41.
41.
I don't think I've had that much of a change in the community development budget.
So it probably is that. Okay, all right. Cool.
It's income from pensioner housing, which is not coming through now. Is that right? Sorry, you're not sure?
I'd have to confirm that, but that would be what I would think it would be, yes.
It would be A,
yeah. But I can come back and confirm that for you.
It kind of sticks out like...
Yeah. And just one other, on page 24, the comprehensive revenue, the rates note comes to 140,000, and in the explanatory notes, but this says 148,000. Again, not material, but wondered.
Sorry, Angela, can you just repeat what you said?
Sorry, so I'm on page 24.
Yes.
Up the top, the rates revenue, the variable is 148,000 here, but the explanatory notes say 140,000. If I added up the red brackets and the correctly, which is 500. If you look on page, the pages are not on the big A3.
The fold out.
Yeah.
The first fold out. First centre fold.
Notes to rates and water by metre is favourable 520,000, and then take off 380,000 comes to 140. It's minor, but
I see. Yeah.
We have to be right with our figures.
It's different because we're talking in millions in one and then in hundreds of thousands.
No, but there's actually 8,000 difference as well.
Noted.
That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Angela. Jeff again.
Yeah, sorry about that, Gary.
Time,
I forgot to ask this the first time round. Just got a query on number 30, paragraph 30, revenue variances. There's a bullet point there, higher rates penalties received and lower hardship remissions issued. It's the second time in a couple of months, in a few months that I've seen something about higher rates penalties. And I'm just wondering do we have some sort of issue there? But also I'm just intrigued that we've got higher rates penalties and yet we're issuing less rates remissions. Does that suggest our system's not quite working right, or we're not publicising our remissions policy well enough, or just feels like something's not quite
changed?
And also, would it be? I'd really be keen to get a more in-depth report on this at some point, on where we're at with our rates collection.
Just good question, Jeff. Paul has brought this up about the ageing of rates at one stage. Didn't we ask for some report on this previously?
Yes.
I'm trying to highlight how you bring up good questions, Paul.
Morning, everyone. We did include some figures actually in the last Finance Committee in the overdue debtors report with regards to rates, penalties, and brought forward rates debt. So I can certainly redistribute that.
Will that answer Jeff's question? Because there is a dichotomy there where you've got
our remissions
we've got more people struggling to pay their rates and fewer people taking up the remission thing, which would kind of doesn't quite gel. Unless they're different people, obviously they're different people within categories, yeah.
Yeah, they inevitably will be different people. So the rates remission budget that was increased a couple of years ago, and the remissions that have been provided to ratepayers have remained pretty much static over that time. So although the budget was increased and the thresholds were slightly increased, we haven't seen a big increase with regards to the number of remissions. With regards to the rebates, so there's two portions of that. The government offer a rates rebate, and council also offer an additional hardship remission on top of that. So our staff.
You're using the words rebates and remissions interchangeably, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you stick with one?
Sure.
You pick your best one and just stick with it.
Okay. We'll go with remission. So the government offer a remission, and that's effectively $610 for this year for those ratepayers that qualify, and that's based on income. So for that, we've it's a maximum. It is a maximum. Yes. Sorry. That's correct. Yeah. It's a sliding scale based on income versus the level of rates. Our team have processed about 1,500 of those for this year. In addition to that, there's the council remission, and that has a maximum of $464. And again, there's a slightly different qualifying criteria. Again, it is based on income versus the level of rates. And to date, we've processed about 450 of those to our ratepayers, but certainly the number that we've processed is less than what was sitting in the budget.
And the higher rates penalties, because I mean, it just feels to me that it's not a good PR thing. You know, it's something we really would prefer not to be doing. What's happening there?
Absolutely. So the rates penalties is as a result of unpaid instalments at the end of a due date. So we invoice quarterly, and there's a 10% penalty applied for those ratepayers that haven't paid their instalment. But that takes away those ratepayers where we have an arrangement in place. So and also any direct debits, that kind of thing. So we hear from ratepayers quite regularly. Once a penalty has been applied, they'll get a letter from us to let them know, and that's our opportunity to look at things like rates rebates and come up with some sort of payment arrangement that best suits them. We have the ability then to remove the penalty if it meets the penalty remission policy, and that's just a good payment history or a satisfactory arrangement for payment. Certainly my team will always look at doing our best for our ratepayers. It's not our intention, obviously, to charge more in penalties. With regards to the total penalty amount, so as you know, the rates increase every year. The penalty amount has actually stayed reasonably static, and I think we're actually tracking a little bit less this year than we were last year. So the budget,
you're talking in absolute terms or in percentage terms?
In absolute, yes.
So
yes.
if the rates go up, I suppose you'd expect the faults to go up as well.
To increase also.
In proportion, though. Yeah.
That's correct, yes. So we've budgeted this year, part of the budget for this year is $775,000 for rates penalties. I think we'll be looking around about between $950,000 and $1 million in total for the end of the financial year. The budget has been adjusted for next year to reflect that. So the penalties that will be incurred this year, that's reasonably static.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Leo.
Page 22, 54 emerging issues. 57C, these river slips, is that solely the responsibility of council to repair those? Or is the regional council, property owner and all those sort of persons involved in that? Because there's one there which I've seen which is downstream from Allendale, where somebody's back section basically has disappeared. Be fairly expensive to repair, I would say. Does the regional council come to the party on these, or is it solely our responsibility?
It's a mixture. The answer to the regional council is no. It's generally the landowner or Hamilton City Council as the landowner, e.g. we own the reserve adjacent to it.
I understand that.
Quite often there's contention over causation and of the problem and who pays what. So we generally handle these on a horses for courses basis because they all have their unique nuances to them. So, but I think the thing that and I was just looking at the briefing schedule as well, we'll be coming back to council with the significant rainfall events, 3 that we've had in the last 2 months. We have a increase in the number of slips along the river walkway, which is concerning in a number of ways. Public safety, potentially, obviously we close them off as soon as we hear about them, and the other thing is the cost for remediation. So we generally try and work with the landowners, and quite often it's a holistic approach to that, depending on the situation, and we do get the regional council involved around soil erosion issues and matters like that.
Okay.
Yep, okay, because it's the same topic.
It is, it's exactly the same topic. So I sit on the Central Catchment Committee with Chris at the moment, and the involvement of the city, of the regional council, is around agreements under Project Watershed. So if we have works to be completed for the purpose of erosion management, catchment management in general, which can sometimes come into the high weather events, and that is a discussion to have with regional council if there's greater erosion into the river as a result of rain and natural causes, if you like. They will enter into a discussion about that, but that's got to be done through the Project Watershed rate that we manage on behalf of the regional council. So, so there is a two-way dialogue, and Chris and I have already talked just lately about how we can increase our conversation with regional council about the what we see are the major needs for the city. There might be some reprioritisation that might occur once those conversations have taken place.
Sorry, Dave.
And that was, are we doing enough to promote or alert the public to the remissions? And I want to home in on that, because we haven't had an answer, and I'm not so, to be more specific, what promotion do we do? And the reason I'm asking that myself is that I continually come across people that are not aware of the council remission policies, who are aware of the Internal Affairs Department one, and it may be, tell me, that the two are sort of addressed together when someone comes in, but obviously there, from what you say, there are different numbers getting them, so some apply. I'm not sure whether some just get one or both, or how that works.
You're absolutely right. So ultimately, someone would need to qualify for the government remission in the first instance before we then look at the council hardship remission. So council. So
that's over and above the government one.
That's correct. Yeah. In terms of notifying our ratepayers, so every year, once we set the rates, we then contact all the ratepayers that have received a rates remission in the past, just to let them know that it's time again. We then send staff away to various sites throughout the city, just to make it easier for our ratepayers to come and visit us and have their application witnessed. It requires an authorised person to review and witness their signature. So we visit the libraries, the woodlands, the gardens, and we just try to get out into the community. We then deal with appointments through the office, and after that we do home visits to those people that are physically unable to come in and see us as well. So in terms of promotion, as well as the letters that go out with the first rates invoice to all residential properties, there's a flyer that's sent out with regards to the rates remission, the government rates remission, which is provided to us by the Department of Internal Affairs. So we include that. And I guess the important thing is that any discussion that we have with our ratepayers, whether it be ourselves or our customer service centre, we always look at the possibility of a rates rebate, particularly if the conversation is around difficulty in payment.
Yeah. Traditionally, they mainly apply to pensioners? Because that's a question,
would
sorry.
Make up the higher proportion of the total applicants, yes, just purely based on the income figure and either the single living alone or the joint, the married couple super figures. So
have we thought of supplying information to, I can't remember what, is it MSD or whatever alphabet soup name the department currently uses?
LGB.
Sorry? You know, is it wins? I honestly don't know now. You used to know that because they used to last for about 10 years. Now it's about 18 months. But have we thought of supplying them information for a new pension applications for people that have just retired, in other words? Because that's could be when it kicks in for someone that's newly on that they haven't bothered about it before. I can see the continuity will work, but the new one, because we have, the reason we put up the amount, the budget, was because we thought, well, we're maxing out. In fact, we went over it at the old level, so with the new people coming on stream, it's going to cost us more, so we better budget more.
In answer to your question, no, we don't provide that information, and I guess it's the flyer that gets sent out with the rates invoice alerting to it, but no, we don't. Does someone qualify for part of a year? So if they, retire partway through one of our financial years, they could come and get a partial. It's based on the income from the previous financial year. So if someone was working and then retired partway through that year, it takes into account the total income for that year.
Our one is based on that because I recall when we first brought that in 2000 that it was supposed to be based on people's current income at that point in time.
It's based on the income as of the last financial.
Okay, can we put that on the policy list, because someone may have been earning $100,000 in a job, retires, they go onto the pension alone, and they don't qualify for another year potentially. So it just seems like that's a gap, if you like. So I'm not asking for a discussion now. Can we? I don't know where you do that for a policy discussion.
Can we have that noted as part of the 10-year plan process, because the revenue and financing policies that have come up there, Councillor McPherson?
Yeah, either we get the budget right, because it's not much need, or we provide the information to the people who may qualify, but don't know to apply for whatever reason.
The best remission, of course, is just a reduction of rates, isn't it?
Not necessarily, Mr. Chair, but I can understand why you would say that.
Yeah.
Can I just also, comment on there as well? So
don't pick winners and losers.
The council remission replicates the requirements of the government remission. So if potentially, from what you're saying, then someone may not apply for or not qualify for the government remission, but then qualify for council's hardship remission. So that's just the basis we use to determine qualifying criteria.
But you said in one of your earlier answers there's slightly different criteria. You actually used those words.
There's higher qualifying criteria for the council remission as opposed to the government remission.
Well, I'm asking that we have a look at that policy, because I actually was the one that moved the resolution way back, and it wasn't meant to be quite like that, like it's turned out. I can understand why it would be for ease of application, but there may be different reasons. Yeah. Okay, so that's noted by someone, and it'll go onto someone's agenda somewhere along the line sometime. Okay, thank you. Angela.
Just a request, Mr. Chair, following on from some of the questions, and it was on the rates penalty and how we, we're getting more sort of a bit of a disturbing trend there, and I raised that for the first time at the last meeting. I'm looking at the email that you followed up for me, Tracy, and you sent it to all of us, and I'm just wondering if there is, if you can work with staff, Mr. Chair, and get into the report, into the regular finance report around this, because in the email that Tracy sent, it's got the percentage of where those penalties lie, and even though it's residential and commercial all included in this one, it says that Temple View have a 19.2% in terms of number of units that have been penalised. So it'd be actually interesting, because this comes down to rates of affordability for our residents, and it would be really interesting information to have some of that information that you sent, Tracy, in that email captured in a regular space in the report somewhere, along with a little bit of trend data from previous years, because as I said at the last meeting, it was the first time I'd really seen that on commentary in a report. And if that's going to start happening more and more as we're facing a new financial term, we need to be taking into affordability.
Okay, Angela, can you just be a bit more specific about what you want? So are you looking for a geographic?
I can talk offline, but I just wanted to raise it here because the information that Tracy sent in that email was really helpful. But if that could be included in regular reporting, I think that would give the committee an oversight on actually what's happening in the real world out there in terms of affordability for ratepayers.
That's fine. And in addition to that, the Revenue and Financial Strategy Task Force will also be considering affordability as an aspect of rates as part of their work program as well. More of a setting, from a setting perspective, rather than a reporting perspective, but that sort of weaves together, Councillor.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I've just got a couple of comments, or a few comments. Just, I see we're getting quite significant savings through our electricity, which is good. Is that because we're no longer heating the chamber? It's freezing in here.
Yes.
It is. Is that right? All right. That might be one saving we could dispense with. Okay. Just to put a few things into context, I see overall on page, where are we? 24 on the big statement of comprehensive revenue and expenditure, that personnel costs have gone up 9.3% for the year. That's not against budget, that's against last year. So there's and this is something that we've all approved, so I'm not, but just want to put into context that people understand that. And I've done a little calculation, and at that rate, by the end of the year, the additional personnel cost will be greater than the additional funds we get through the 3.8% rate increase. So in actual fact, the 3.8% rate increase minus the increase in salaries will be a negative figure. So it's just in context.
Yes, so further context to that though, Tracy, can you please explain that as well?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so there's two reasons for that. So first of all, there is the additional staff, which Councillor Bunting for the zoo brought up a bit earlier. The second one is the security, so our city safe staff. So we've moved them and we've employed them rather than them being on contract. So you'll see that there's actually a favourable variance in our other expenses, which is the complete offset for that in personnel.
Okay, thank you. On page 32, we've got some the points, the explanations. There are some reductions in expenditure in arts and culture. They are because of the closure of the CBD and Founders. Is that right? We say personnel cost $259,000 favourable.
Yes.
Okay. So those will, if and when we re-establish those two things, presumably those savings will disappear.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Just on page 34, the top box of explanations, gains and losses, which is the last of those explanations. I can't understand, what does that mean?
So those are when we are disposing of certain assets. So if we're disposing of an asset that hasn't quite reached its useful life from a fixed asset book perspective, then obviously we have a gain and a loss on sale for whatever those particular things are. So we've obviously disposed of various assets, and the list, to be fair, is quite long. And then so obviously it just adds up with whatever the difference in the book value is.
Can someone just give us an example of what that is? What could be in there? Sean, you might know what they are. Are there?
So some of it might be playgrounds.
It's more Lance's area. So what sort of things would that be? So you say disposing of an asset. So I sort of think if we've sold a building, and within that building there's a whole lot of furniture or fixtures or something like that we haven't written down yet.
Yeah, that sort of stuff, and what Tracy talked about, components in a playground and those
okay,
sorts of things.
so just what's an example of one? What's an example of a playground we've disposed of, or a building we've disposed of where this has occurred? Can you think of it?
there's been a couple of smaller parks where we've removed equipment that's ended up being dangerous and not meeting standards and that sort of thing.
So it's equipment that still had value in our balance sheet, but we've now taken it away and we've written all that off.
Yeah.
Okay.
And in other places there might be some asset components, parts of things. I can't give you any exact examples off the top of my head, but I could give you offline, give you some further examples if you want.
Okay. Now I just want to get a sort of a concrete understanding of what that means, but now I understand what that means. Thank you. Just on page 37, administration costs, so we're in economic and development, they're increased this year to last year by 8.5%. Sean, do you know what kind of is driving that? I think it's Sean's department.
It'll be largely because we've...
Kelvin, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's right. We do have a small part. No. Just repeat the question again, Councillor.
So this is a this year versus last year, not a this year budget against actual. Yeah. So the admin costs have gone from 3.579 to 3.885.
Yep.
Which is a 8.5% increase. I'm just why are those things gone up?
I'd have to come back and have a look at it. I haven't got the detail on me now to understand it. And then it will be a roll-up of both Sean's area and mine, so we'll just have to work through what that is. I'll come back to you if that's cool.
Thank you. Okay, just on, someone's already asked this one about the pensioner housing one on page 41. That was Angela, I think. The governance one, on page 43. Could you, and this is probably you, Leanne, last year professional costs, so we're in the expenses part of the report, professional costs were 189,000, they're now 657,000, and admin costs have gone up significantly too. Just what makes up those expenses, do you know?
I don't know definitively.
So if I can help out, it's predominantly... it may be predominantly the elections. So the budgets came through for the elections for this year. So, it only comes every 3 years, of course. So,
okay. Can you just confirm that that's what it is? Because the elections, from memory, about 350 or something, isn't it? This is that issue we had before, isn't it, Tracy? About we didn't accrue the election cost. We just
there was timing through the January and December period,
January,
but the total budget was around elections on top of ordinary governance, but we'll come back to you and confirm.
Okay, so we'll get that confirmed. Okay, thank you. So we're now on Parks and Green Spaces, page 45. Parks and Spaces has got a significant increase in depreciation from the former year. So 2.8 to 300 to 3 million. So 2.8 million to 3 million. Just a lot of your stuff, Lance, is land. So do you know what would be driving the increase on top of that?
I don't think we wouldn't be depreciating the land. It would it'll be things that we've built.
That'll be buildings.
Yeah.
It'll be the buildings that were revalued at the end of last year.
Yeah. Which
weren't included in the budget.
Okay, so that's the same depreciation thing we're seeing coming through here.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, page 47, which is the rubbish and recycling. Are the costs of the wheelie bin consultation, etc., in here?
Yes.
Where would they be?
Through the chair, they will be through the professional costs and
Okay. So when was most of that incurred? Was it this financial year, wasn't it? So it started from June, the work started predominantly from June 2016. Yeah. Okay, so that's already accounted for. Okay. Thank you. Okay. On page 49, we talk about paid connections in the notes on the back. What are paid connections? Sorry.
Paid connections are when someone connects to our network, so they're provided a stormwater service. So that means through Curvin Channel or some sort of discharging to our stormwater system.
So does that occur for every dwelling, every house? This isn't a water meters thing, is it? No. So I mean, it's not businesses connecting up. Sorry. Yep.
You'll see a line in our wastewater program, our water program, and our stormwater program. So it's basically user paid.
Yep.
So we do the work, but we charge a fee for it. So you'll see one of the things in there, because of growth, we're way ahead in terms of the number of connections we're doing, but it's all cost neutral to us. So we do the work, but we recover the costs through a customer connection fee.
And who do you get the money from? From the resident or from the developer? Or?
Generally from the builder who's connecting it up. So it's normally put in when the house is built and they connect to our network.
And so that's just a consequence of quite a lot of house building going on. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Just on, why on page 51, transport, this is the only part of the City Council where our assets haven't gone up or our depreciation hasn't gone up. Why we've been putting in more roads just doesn't seem to be right. Or was there no revaluation done on the roads?
So obviously transport doesn't have buildings in it, so it was the buildings that were revaluation that has affected most of the other
so
activities.
That wasn't part, yeah, okay.
So no, so that won't be included in that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and just on page 55, and you have noted this to advise us of this before, that water by metre has dropped from last year. So it was 6.9 million. It's now 6.4 million. So I just wonder, is it your experience, Tracy, I won't look at you because you won't have a clue. Is it your experience that when people pay for water based on usage rather than pay for water based on the value of their property, they tend to be more efficient in their use of water and they tend to react to price signals and things like that? Well, you just answer using your experience.
just leave it with the chair to ponder his own answer.
What's that?
I'll leave it with the chair to ponder his own answer.
I'd like to hear it from the horse's mouth. What do you find that generally happens?
Well, certainly what we're seeing is a reduction in water use at the moment. So certainly a reduction in the commercial properties which are water metered. But I think it could be seasonal as well in terms of the amount of rain we've had.
Is it so? How does rain? But how does rain help you? I mean, we're talking about drinking water, aren't we? We're talking about the only thing we water by meter by. Hang on, that's water by meter. So that's only the water the clean water that comes into our property. Is that right? Is what we measure and what we charge for.
Sorry, just reframe your question.
So the water by meter is clean. So it's not stormwater and it's not sewage. Or the only thing we can measure is the stuff that comes into a property through a meter. So it's clean water. So why? So are people running outside with cups and when it's raining and drinking that? Why do you say? Why does rain? Hang on. Why does water? Oh, okay. So they.
Yeah, so we only water meter our industry and rural.
Yep. That's right. Yep.
People we water. But we're seeing a reduction in commercial, and that's good. So we're charging water, and people like the university have got programs and they're reducing their water use because they've got to pay for it.
Yep.
But generally, I think reduction just in water use, just because people not watering gardens, I guess, because of the season we've had.
Okay, but we've had we've had spectacular growth across the good growth across the region in commercial and residential and commercial growth. So you think that rain? So that means a lot of these people have been have normally irrigated their grounds or something like that, and they're not now letting the rain do it. Is that?
Sorry, I've got some chatter going on here.
They could be. Yeah, they could be. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. I mean, well, I guess in all seriousness, we've got a $500,000 drop in income from last year. Yet we've had growth in that there are more people on the water by metre thing. So something, it's either the economics of metering and people are being more efficient in the way they use it.
I think we're definitely seeing a trend of our top water users being more efficient. We've done a lot of analysis on it, and the general trend is there's a reduction in our top 10 water users. So, we've got a few industry that use a lot of our water, and we're definitely seeing some reductions like the university, some quite significant reductions which have an impact on our estimated revenue.
So you've got any idea why the university have reduced their water consumption?
I think they've got targeted programs in place to look at sustainability in water use.
Does that, like most businesses, if you have a downturn in revenue, that's a concern. Is that a concern for us? I mean, economies of scale and that's the stuff start working backwards too, don't they? If you've built up all this infrastructure because you've got so many customers, but suddenly the customers stop coming, and you've still got the big infrastructure there, is it?
No, look, I don't think it's a concern that, we're still largely around our estimated water use, so we're not a long way off it. So every year we're sort of re-estimate. It's just a budget, an estimate that we're trying to forecast year on. So, look, I'm not concerned.
Yeah. Probably just one of the aspects, sorry, Mr. Chair, to consider is the fact that we are going to have increased demand over time. So we are projecting growth in the city over time. So we actually quite encourage efficient use of water across the city, either through education campaigns or residential, but also within our commercial sector, because it does give us that increased capacity we need and may well feed into our discussions about the timing of our next intervention from a capital point of view. Yes, so that's the other aspect as well. And so that's not necessarily a bad thing or a good thing, it's just a thing.
Okay, and I understand that. Yeah. But you build up an infrastructure to deliver this water. One of your customers one of your sectors is reducing its payments because it's reducing its usage. That doesn't reduce your capital expenditure. Your built capital, which you've built up, is still there. Does that mean that over time, if this continues, for example, if take it to absurdum, if that went to zero, all of that infrastructure and framework we've got there is still there, it's still got to be paid for, does that then go on to presumably goes on to the ratepayer?
I can answer that one. So in the absurd example, not your example being absurd, but the absurd example you used within your example, ultimately that's what the small communities are facing around New Zealand is their population's decline, they've got stranded assets. Yeah. And to the extent they no longer need those assets, they need to write them off and they become a loss. If they mothball them, or if they can't mothball them, got to serve a lower level of the population, it becomes ineffective to charge the users that are using it because they're no longer economic for two, let's say we've got two users using a $10 billion system. The ratepayer has to pick up the additional cost to keep it going. Yeah. So that is, but that's not the case here. We're not in that position whereby these, as Chris said, overall our water usage is in line with where we expect it to be. We get some pluses and minuses. If you recall, last year and the year before, we talked about some of the higher demand that was coming on board in terms of some of our big industry players, particularly those that are hugely wet industry orientated, dairy goat, for example. They can have a significant impact the other way. So we have an obligation to maintain a certain degree of capacity, and we fluctuate within that capacity to ensure that we deliver appropriate water services. It doesn't concern us in any respect.
Yeah, and just to build on that, we've got to cater sort of for peak demand. Yep. When it's dry and our primary industry need water, we've got to be able to cater for the that peak demand. So we're just in a period where, you know, they're down a bit, but next year with the weather patterns in our top 10 water users, they could have a demand for the water, so we've got to be ready for that. So you look at, and the tolerance, Andrew's just looking at the variance, it's around 5%, so it's not a large variance from what we predicted.
Okay. If that continued onward, would that would be a concern though? If next year it was another $500,000 down?
Yeah, but I guess that's continually what we're doing through annual plans and 10-year plan processes, looking at that. We have strong relations with our top 10 water users and in terms of trying to forecast their needs and what they need. So we're continually looking at that.
Okay, thank you. That's me done. Paula.
Thank you. Just following on a couple of little things that came out of your questions, actually, Mr. Chair.
Did I seed you?
No, just telepathically. Page 51, where you were talking about transportation, I just wondered, the depreciation of roading assets wasn't at this time. That was buildings. When will that occur? When will the road raised assets, bridges? Blah, blah,
it's
blah.
planned for this coming financial year to do the transport revaluation.
Okay, so we should expect some movement in terms of that. That's good. And
sorry, Paula, it will definitely be increase, won't it? Because we've put more roads in. How often? Every 3 years is it cycling? So we've got more roads than we had 3 years ago. So it will be unusual that the depreciation doesn't increase. Is that right? Significantly?
Wait a sec, sorry, that's inappropriate and disrespectful. So no, the issue is we already capitalised our roads that are there, so we are going to get an increase in our roads and depreciation. What the revaluation will do will test whether or not the unit price for the replacement of those assets has gone up, and if it does, that drives an upward revaluation. The other factor is if we change the useful life of those assets, it effectively stretches that cost over a longer or shorter period and consequent increase at that point as well. So this may be, we tend to see a little blip increase in our asset depreciation towards the end of the year when we catch up on our work in progress, but we've actually been doing a really good job to stay on top of our work in progress for the time being, so that isn't coming through as much anymore.
All right, thank you.
Because that area did experience quite the construction of roads is one of the big growth areas in terms of cost, isn't it? Materials and labour and everything around road construction is going up, so I guess we should just be wary of that. But you're saying, Richard, that you've factored that in?
Increase for current roads that have been built won't be as big an increase for roads that have been there for 3 years that haven't been revalued. So we will get an increase probably in both, to be fair, because the indices are moving up.
They have been one of the most aggressive movement indices, haven't they, really?
Yep.
Okay, and governance on page 43. I presume the savings in personnel have occurred over the full year, so that's quite a few years before this term of politics as well. That's the personnel across the whole governance department on the top floor, yeah? Yep. Including the new advisors that are coming in place will change that over time slightly. But
sorry, Paul, are you talking about versus last year or against budget or both?
Against budget.
Okay.
Because this budget isn't just
underspent
this term
by half, isn't it?
Yeah, this budget isn't just this term. It's.
That's right. This budget starts from the 1st of July 2016.
Right.
Yeah.
So not all of those savings will sit within this year.
That's right.
Just out of interest, though, the changes to the office, which I'm not disputing shouldn't have occurred or anything, but the changes of moving the mayor's office and all that building, there's nothing in the property cost. So where would you see the cost? Because that's a governance-related cost, needing suitable premises for the mayor to operate out of as he feels he should. So he needs that. So where does it sit, though? Where does because that is an expense that government has generated.
I can't comment on how the individual line items are aggregated up for the totals in this report, and I will undertake to answer Councillor Mallett's earlier question and investigate that with you. But I can assure you that the costs related to the office reorganisation have been attributed to 845 as a code, which rests with me.
Didn't pay for it yourself, did you, Andrew?
It'll be in the operating and maintenance line. So it's not a property cost as such, it'll be part of the maintenance.
Oh.
So it'll be in operating and maintenance, it'll be in that line there.
So it sits within that...
so just under other expenses, it says operating and maintenance costs.
115.
115, it'll be in there.
Oh, no, there was doors and windows and things. I'm just wanting transparency to be where it's set, because I thought it should sit under governance, and I couldn't see it, that was all. And I'm not disputing in any way that it shouldn't have happened, I'm just talking about it being a governance cost, that's all. Yeah.
The door was repaired because it was wind blowing through it all the time, and it was whistling like it was a ghost in the office, so both sides.
Believe me, I'm not disputing the need for you to have a good office, Mr. Mayor. The other question, eh?
He gave up his the luxury.
Yeah, I don't know why.
He went down, Mark.
Who's there now?
Yes.
Mahogany Row.
Slightly smaller window, one could say. But anyway, in terms of the other one, I've lost a little tab, but it related to what you said about City Safe coming on board as staff as opposed to contractors. And so you said that that was a complete offset from the contract costs. Presumably, though, when they become staff as opposed to external contractors, we start contributing to things like KiwiSaver and other things. So you're saying it's neutral, that them coming on board as employees?
That is correct, yes.
Oh, well done.
Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a question following on from your discussion on the commercial water meters. Councillors may recall during the last term there was an issue around billing for commercial water, and I just wondered if the 6.9 million in the year to date in the prior year compared with the budget and the actual is a result of a catch-up in some of those water rates that weren't billed, that were subsequently billed and collected in that year. Does anyone know? Don't know.
We can follow up. That's actually a really good point, Councillor Pascoe. There would have been a catch-up in last year's numbers. The extent of how much that is and whether it's material or not.
No, I was just looking to see whether that may be been a reason why it was almost 7 million too.
It's a very logical observation. We can do a bit of work just to validate that.
Yeah, well, no, I guess if that is likely to be when that additional revenue was received, then that will be the answer without necessarily knowing how much it was, because you would have presumably then adjusted into this year that you would not have had that catch-up.
I'm intrigued enough now to find out myself. So
okay, all right.
Once I find out, I'll let you know.
I'm happy for you to do that.
You weren't going to do anything if I asked the question, were you?
And the second part of the question is, given that we are about $400,000 less on budget, has that billing issue resurfaced? Is the billing issue a possible problem for that reduced revenue? And if you're not sure, is it a good time just to be reviewing that to make sure that the new commercial water metered people are in fact being billed, which I think was where the wheels fell off last time.
Yeah, no, we're confident it's not a billing issue. So we looked into it in quite a bit of detail for this month. So we're confident it's not a billing issue.
Okay,
that's a consumption issue.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any further questions on this exciting report? Okay, we'll move on to debate. Is there any debate? All right, I'll move that I'll just make sure I get the wording right, that the 10-year monitoring report for the 10 months ended 30th of April 2017 be received. James, myself and James, those in favour, those against, carried. Thank you. Thank you, Tracy. Okay, so we're on to item 7 now, Key Projects Monitoring Report up to March 2017, page 65. And David's going to inform us on that.
Thank you, councillors. Page 65, key monitoring report. I'll take the report as read. We're happy to take any questions.
I've got a couple. So page 65, paragraph 6, bullet point 3, Rototuna Town Centre new agreement phase. Could you just explain what that is? Oh, you may not know, David, but someone will.
I can.
Yeah, thank you.
So we've been working through the comprehensive development plan in partnership with Kirkdale Investments. We've basically got to the stage where that's been lodged, and then there's a resource consent for the
Does lodged mean with our resource people consent? Okay,
yeah, with our regulatory people. So essentially that's coming to the end of its, the end of that part, that phase of the program, and the new agreement was the agreement with Kirkdale Investments around that CDP. So good progress has been made, and first CDP in that area, and then there's a series of resource consents that will come out of that once Kirkdale want to get away the town centre and do some subdivision and that sort of thing.
So this is kind of near the new high school, the Christian school, that area, eh?
Yeah,
okay.
Just on the corner of North City Road there in that vicinity, yep.
Thank you, Lance. Just page 66, paragraph 9, the picturesque garden contract delay. Can you just explain how much higher it is over, how much bigger than budget it is? Or how much we've overshot our budget on that one?
The initial tender was over budget, but the final tender isn't. There's been a series of negotiations around that. As I mentioned previously, a lot of the work in the Gardens Development Program is quite bespoke, so it's not a normal type of construction work. So finding contractors, A, has been difficult in a hot market, and B, when we find them, they like to charge us a premium, so then we get round the table and start having the conversations around that. That's taken a bit of time, but the project will be delivered within scope and within budget, so that's just delayed things a bit.
So Lance, paragraph 9 is now out of date, is that what you're saying? Because it says there was higher. Okay, so you'll
the tender they submitted was higher, so we've negotiated it within the budget.
Okay, so
initially it was higher than budget.
So that you now you could say which has now been resolved and is within budget. You could add that to paragraph 9.
As you'll see in the traffic light chart, what that's done is just delayed the actual construction for a couple of months. But we'll. Peter had a meeting yesterday with the contractors. I haven't been updated on that, but I can provide a further update in the next couple of weeks, an executive update just on how long that delay will be. We think it's probably a couple of months, and depending on the weather too.
All right, thank you. And the last one is paragraph 14, just the North City Road urban upgrade. Is that all related also to the, is that North City Road that's out Rototuna Town Centre? That's the same, all the same development, eh?
Yeah, so that's the construction of the road within that town centre, which is tied up with that comprehensive development plan that I talked about. But Chris's roading team handled that discussion with the developers.
Okay, thank you. That's me done. Ziggy.
Mr. Chair, I just have got a question for that number 9, just going on from what you said about the picturesque garden. I just wondered whether, yes, we go out to the marketplace to find builders and so on, but have we ever looked at Wintec? I mean, students to do some of that work for cost, for example, and for giving them a chance to learn some new skills?
We don't in the construction for a bunch of reasons. Some of them probably aren't quite skilled or qualified for that. The one thing we do, Wintec students though do a lot of work at the gardens. We have the classrooms there, we have the horticultural classes. They pretty much look after the big veggie garden there. with Peter's team, so there's a lot of students working in there manually and also doing the academic side of things too. So we have quite a strong relationship. So and in other parts of the garden as well, they rub shoulders with our qualified staff, and obviously it's related to the curriculum that they're following. So we have a really strong relationship there, and we do have a lot of Wintec students. On the development programs, no, but they might help out with planting and some things that they've got the skills for.
Because, I mean, the tutors that they have got there, they are qualified. So that's why I thought if you've got some qualified people there, just a thought.
Yeah, we look at those sorts of things, and you've got to weigh up that with the supervision needed and the time involved and meeting deadlines. So you've got to weigh all that up. So where we can, we do use outside people and that sort of thing. I think Peter's got quite significant experience in that field, and he's pretty well honed around what works and what doesn't.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Mark.
Thank you. Staying on the picturesque gardens, you said we've negotiated it down. I don't want to get into the commercially sensitive area of it, but does that mean that we're going to get a lesser quality for the same budget, or is it, have they come to the party? Where are we at?
We look at components because even though we have the scope, quite often a tenderer will come in and so they want to use Hinawera stone, and then the end, through the negotiation, this is just an example that we might say, well, you can use some basalt instead, which is half the price of whatever. So that's the sort of thing that goes on, is just actually having a look at component by component, and that quite often takes quite a bit of time. So the quality of the garden will be within the scope, and the quality will be what we normally expect at Hamilton Gardens, so you don't have to worry about that.
Right, so you're quite happy with it?
Yeah.
Yeah, great, cool. And my second question is for Chris, regards the traffic lights on the Western Rail Trail. I was up there the other day, and they had, it was really quite cool. They had people stop going and that kind of stuff, which made me feel quite safe, but how long is that going to last? And what's the progress on that?
We have an issue with Kiwi Rail and doing some work at the moment, so end of June is the last date, so it's just getting Kiwi Rail in to link up their signals with our signals. So we're working on that and trying to get that sooner. We've looked carefully at it, whether we think we could not have the stop-go people there, but in terms of safety we think we need to have them there at certain times. But look, we're aware of it, and we're trying really hard to get Kiwi Rail there a bit sooner to finish it off.
Right, so we're paying for those stop-go people?
We're paying for those. We've included it in the budgets for the Western Rail Trail, but clearly it would be nice to get the work done and complete that part of the project.
So you're saying end of June we should have an answer?
End of June is the maximum, so we're trying to just get that done.
We always put a year on things when we put a date in here now. The end of the year.
Yeah, you got me.
2017.
Sorry, I'm still unsure. Is that so? The end of June we'll have a resolution, or end of June we'll have
the
lights?
work should be completed, and we can take away the stop-go people and the manual traffic control.
Cool, thank you. That's all for me.
Thanks, Mark. James.
Yeah, I like passport for that.
Just the North City Road urban upgrade. Obviously, the Rotorua Junior High School and also residents around the area have concerns about that area, just with safety of students, a lot of them biking around and walking. So it says here the designs are progressing. What's the speed limit of North City Road at the moment? I just can't quite remember.
We're just, we think it's probably about 80 at the moment. I'm just not 100% sure on that.
Okay, so is that going to come back to the, is that something they'll look at, or?
80?
No, it's 80 coming off the K Road, and to head into North City it drops down to 50 just by the church there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
I tour that road every morning with my daughter.
So is this something that will be looked at in those the designs, or is it something that will come back to the speed management task force we've set up to have a look at?
Look, I'll take that. There's two things here, I guess. One is the existing situation, and I'll just review that with my transport team. The other issue is, that's where Andrew's just been this morning. So now that we've got the comprehensive development plan, it charts the way forward for the upgrade of North Grade Road. So Andrew's been in a meeting with the developer there about upgrading the road and getting that one back on track, and what the road will feel like and what the permanent speed limits will be like. But if your issue is about current safety, I'll get our transport team to look at that at the moment.
Yeah, just I've had quite a few questions about the speed limit around there, and the because the road isn't complete at the moment, so it's a bit of rough condition. Yeah. And people do rip through there quite fast. Yeah,
like I think there'll still be a period of time while it's still like that, so we'll look at that in the interim, and we're doing a lot of work with the school about safety in there. That one hasn't come onto my personal radar, but I'll go and have some discussions with my transport team about that.
Cheers, thank you.
Okay, there being no further questions, is there any debate? I'll move the recommendation. Mallet, Saseki, those in favour, those against, carried. We'll break for smoko now till 11:15.
I haven't heard smoke.
Started counting the officers in the quorum for a second there. Takes 3 of you to equal 1 councillor, I think, isn't it? Is that how the ratio works? 1, 2, I'm not sure it's a multiplier. 3, 4, 5, 6. Need 1 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right, we're underway. We're on item. Yeah, that's a problem, eh?
So Gary, there's 2 boilers that runs the heating in council.
I've just heard one of them's tipped over. Yeah.
But we've got Cushman coming to repair it.
Okay, cool, thank you. Cool, no, that's warm. Item 8, contract 14378, Three Waters Network Physical Works approved contract sum increase, page 71. This floor's yours, Chris.
Is our capital projects manager in city delivery. So look, I'll take the report as read. I understand I've been alerted there might be a couple of questions, so I'll just keep the introduction brief. Just make the point that we're not asking for any additional funding in this report. It's more about how we spend the funding that's already been approved. So we have a large contract where we do our water renewals in. We entered a contract a few years ago and council approved an approved contract sum. Some of the scope has changed over time, and we're looking for an increase in that approved contract sum to get us to the final year of the contract. So at the end of next year, we'll go back onto the market and tender, all things being equal, another 3-year contract for a supplier to see us through the next 3 years of our renewal program. So look, I know there's been some questions, but I'm just happy to respond to those questions.
Mark.
Because I find this quite hard to understand. So what you're saying, am I right, is that council has approved, say, X amount to head construction over a certain period of time, and we're just bringing forward the pace of that. Is that right?
No, so let me start. Maybe if I could take you to the table on the top of page 73.
Yep.
So first thing, this is largely about the core work that we do in renewing pipes.
Right.
So pipes get to the end of their life and we've got to renew them. So we have programs of work to do that. So we have budgets every year for the infinity, but I guess for the next 3 years, approved budget, it's in 10-year plans to go and do renewal programs. So what we do is we have an outsourcing model. So we have city delivery, it's a unit of mine who do some capital renewal work, but they're largely just maintenance and operations. So we go to the market for the work. So the most efficient way for us to do that is to go and do 3-year contracts. So we go out to the market and say who wants to do our renewal program for the next 3 years, and we get a contractor to do it. So every year we have a different budget and they do the work.
Chris, can you distinguish between contract and budget? I think that is where the misunderstanding comes from.
Yeah. So really councils, I guess there's 2 lines of assurance, and one is the budget and the funding that you give us to spend, and everything that we've done this morning has been about the budget. You've been going through our programs and you've been asking questions about budgets and funding. So that's one line of assurance. And then you drop down to how do we spend the budget. So we either spend it in-house or we go out to tender to do it. And it's a really complicated. We don't just have one contract to do one budget. Sometimes we have a budget but multiple contracts under that to spend it. So the contracting is just the way that we spend the money that you've already approved.
Yeah.
And so the line of assurance that you've put in there is around delegations. So you've delegated to the chief executive a certain amount. So if the contracts are under $2.5 million, the CEO's delegated to just make those decisions about how we spend the money. So it's not spending money you don't have, it's just about how you spend the money. Through the delegations, if the contract is above $2.5 million, we're required to come back to you as council and get approval for those contracts. I think if they're over 5 years as well, we've got to come back and get approval from you. So the CEO's delegated for anything under $2.5 million and under 5 years. Anything outside that comes back to council. So in this case, we came to council in 2015 and said we've been out to the market, we've got a competitive tender price. This is the winning contractor. We want to let a contract to him for $18.5 million, and you can see on the table on page 73 the works that we had in there over 3 years. So over 3 years we had $1.6 million of stormwater renewals budgeted. We had $15.2 million of renewal, and I'll come back to the next line, which is the other works. So it's an estimate of the work at that time, and we get approval from you, and we call that the ACS. At the top is the approved contract sum. So if we spend $1 over that, we have to come back to you and get approval to go over it. So it's another line of assurance for you that we just gives visibility to what we're doing to our large contracts.
Right, so this kind of thing would happen normally, it's just the quantum is bigger, so that's why we're getting alerted to it.
Yeah, yep, quite, it's because the approval that we've got from you in 2015 was for $18.5 million, so if we'd got to the end of the 3 years and we were under 18.5, we wouldn't be coming back to you. But we're alerting you to the fact that the contract goes to June 2018, and we're likely to, subject to your approval today, we will exceed the approval we've got. So we're not asking for extra money, it's for work that you've already budgeted, it's just how we do the work. So you can see from that table that the renewals are fairly constant, but we've increased the other work. And we've put some examples of those in paragraph 18 if you go to page 73. We're saying, so the contract is a convenient and efficient way for us to get work done. Because what we have is we have a contractor there who's been procured in a very competitive market. We've got competitive rates. If we have other bits of work to do, we could go out to a separate contractor and tender those works, but there's a lot of administrative effort and cost in going out to little contracts. So we choose to do them under this contract. We anticipate that we'll be adding projects to this contract because we can use the competitive rates and get the work done. And we instruct this contractor to do the work. So we have an estimate of the scope of that work or the quantum, and 2 years ago we thought it would be about $1.6 million, but we want to put $6 million through this contractor. So if I go through some of the issues in paragraph 18, it might explain how that changes. So if I start, there's one in there, hang on, so the bottom one's water main renewals to supplement city delivery. So our model that we have is we have city delivery who are mainly looking after our operations and maintenance, but they do some of our capital water renewal projects as well. But we don't have infinite resource there, so when City Delivery get busy, and we've been a very busy 3 months for them as we've had all the rain events and all of their resources have been diverted to cleaning up our wastewater spills and just looking after the operations and maintenance. So they'll get behind on their program to do water renewals. So we will divert their water renewals to this contractor there so we can meet all of the things we need to do with City Delivery to keep our customers happy. So the model we use is that we put them, the work to either in-house or to the contract. So this year we've put a lot more to the contract because our guys have been really tied up with the responding to the water events. So you can see that there's more work then goes through the outsource, but with a competitive rate, and we do lots of other things to make sure that we get value for money. Another example we touched on this morning was the water connections. So when we set our budgets, we had anticipated for both water and wastewater about $60,000 worth of connections, remembering it's a user pays, so it's no impact on our books because the work we do gets paid for by the user. But our budget was, I think from memory, 60 to 70,000, and we're up to 250,000 in each of water and wastewater, and we get this contract to do it. So you can see the quantum of work has increased that we're asking this contractor to do.
So am I right to simplify it down and say really that extra $4.5 million is work we're now outsourcing rather than we're budgeting to do ourselves? Is that too simple?
It's half of the answer. If I just give one more example, and it's probably the wastewater main upsizing to support Peacock Stage 1. So that's a necessary bit of work for our growth in the Peacocks area, and it's to put in a bigger wastewater pipe because with the growing city we need a bigger pipe. So we knew and budgeted for that pipe, but we didn't know 2 years ago how we were going to build that pipe. Now, it could have worked out that we'd worked with the developer and we'd asked the developer to do that work as part of his works and we would have paid him. But in this case, it's turned out to be more expedient for us to do the work ourselves and the developer to do his work. So we've then got an issue, okay, we need to do the work. How do we do that? We could go out to a separate tender for $500,000 worth of work, but the effort to go to the market for $500,000 would far outweigh the benefits we get by just using this contract to do that work. Right. So the budget's there, but we've chosen to use this contract to do the work rather than do a deal with a private developer.
Right. So if you'd had to go to if you'd got lots of different contractors, then this wouldn't be coming across us a desk either.
If we'd gone to lots of different contractors, would have been well below Richard's delegation, and we would just do that. But there's a huge administrative effort, and for us to go to the market for every single little bit of work. If it's a big project, clearly we go to the market and we get a tender price. But this is all repetitive and the same type of work. Like replacing a pipe is replacing a pipe. It's not that complicated. It's expensive, but it's not complicated.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you. I'm sorry if it seemed a bit basic, but I just really want to understand.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark, and thank you, Chris. And just kind of conceptually speaking, you've got the budget, and then a subset of the budget is contracts and or in-house work.
Yep.
If it's a contract job and it's above a certain amount, which we would call the CEO's what do you call it? Delegated authority. Yep. It has to come back to us.
Correct.
So that's exactly what's happening today.
Yep.
Okay.
And yep.
All right. Okay. Are there any more speakers? Questions? All right. I shall move the recommendation. Great big numbers on page 72. Gary and Mark. Those in favour, those against, carried. Thank you. Thanks, Chris. Okay, item number 9, the H3 update. Third quarter report to the 31st of March 2017, page 74. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you, Chair. Perhaps if I could just introduce the paper with a few comments against it. If you look at, or if you cast back to probably this time last year when I did a quarterly report, we had a concern that whilst we had a lot of events taking place across H3, the actual attendance numbers were quite low. You'll note through this report that the reverse has happened this year, in that we still have a lot of events taking place, but the attendance numbers have gone very, very high. And that is, once again, as I explained last year, a good example of how in a single year the tide can change and things fluctuate according to the mix of business and the type of events that we have. So for the quarterly reporting period that we're in now, we didn't have things like Disney on Ice or Ice Age. We didn't have an extra international cricket game at Seddon Park and so forth. So it's just a good reminder that this business does fluctuate quite a bit in terms of the mix of activity we might have from one year to another. I think we've had a number of highlights. We've had a great summer season at Seddon Park with effectively 4 internationals. One additional international came our way, which was fantastic for the city. I'd remind you, however, that whilst we were grateful to have it, and I think the city really benefited from that one additional cricket match, it didn't translate necessarily into increased revenue. It did translate into some increased costs to the city, however. Coming summer, we've got 5 internationals booked at Seddon Park, so it's going to be a very, very busy summer there for us. I'd like to bring your attention to a couple of items in the paper. First of all, on page 81, the chart which is headed 3.1, and once again this is just to highlight this the extreme mix between activity types this year, last year that we've experienced. So on that matter of attendance that we talked about, for Q3 alone, in the period we've had from 1 January through to 31 March, we've had 91,000 attendees at various events at H3 properties compared to 66,000 the year before. So it's just really highlighting how the sort of volatility of those numbers can run. On the next page over, section of the table 3.2, and I understand this came up at a recent Community and Services Committee meeting that I wasn't present at. This is the KPI that we have, the formal KPIs to Council for H3 activity, and I think Councillor Pascoe, you had questions about the off-track result for hire days and activity at our stadia, mainly FMG Stadium Waikato. Just to explain, what we had discovered was that there had been an error long-standing that had been probably taking place for a number of years in how the calculation for the number of events at the stadium was calculated, and basically it was one booking was broken up into 2 or 3 component parts and then added up, and so we found that error. We had noticed it a wee while ago and thought that doesn't look right, but it took a bit of work for us to actually trace back and see in the system how that was happening. So the stadia activity, I can assure you, was actually going extremely well. For the month of May alone, we've got over 50 meetings taking place at FMG Stadium. However, the original KPI that was put in place was totally inappropriate, as it turned out. The other item I'd like to draw your attention to, if I may, is on page 85, and this is table 5.1, which is our CapEx spend. As you will see there, we have an awful lot of catch-up between in the last quarter to do on our capital expenditure. We have already reported to this committee some deferral items, which come up to around $300,000. I can assure you that other than those deferral items, we are on target to actually be caught up on the capital spend. Much of this is to do with timing, and in the case of a lot of work that's going on at Seddon Park right now, we're in that period where it's the balance of this financial year. Once the summer season at Seddon Park was over, now we can get in there. And if any of you have been to Seddon Park in the last few days, it's a bloody mess, to put it lightly. But it is
bloody mess, yes. Waikato Times.
But to put it in context, it's exactly as planned for that work going through. So I realise it looks like a last-minute rush, but a lot of that is to do with that timing that we have for that activity. So Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sean. I've got a couple. Just on page 78, just to sort of get some context, I've just annualised where we are now, and it looks like annual budget. So our annual budget for revenue was 5.991. So that's the far right column.
Yep.
Just annualised for what where we're up to now is 5.8. So, that's 100,000 down, so it's not major. All of our things are slightly below the annual budget when I've annualised them. And that may be inaccurate. As you said, it's that kind of a thing.
Every quarter is different,
yeah.
Yes.
But when is... Okay, so we're in our third quarter now, aren't we?
That's correct.
Yeah, so, sorry, this report is the third quarter.
That's correct.
So we've got one more quarter. Yeah. So it's presumably we've got some stuff at this rugby stadium, FMG stadium, beg your pardon, and there might be a bit of Claudeland stuff. You won't have much in Seddon Park.
No,
cricket-wise, of course, and of course it's a bloody mess at the moment.
If you look across the page to page 79 and table 2.3, you'll actually see we have our forecast there for the year end. And we are looking to, I'd describe that as meeting budget, if not slightly ahead of budget. And we based our forecasting...
So this is the 1%, okay.
Yeah, so we based our forecasting on how our forward book is looking at this point in time. So we have a degree of confidence that we'll achieve our revenue.
Okay, thank you. And on the CapEx issue, what actually are the items that are are the things that are a bit up to that are? Oh, sorry, there they are down the bottom. You've handily answered my question.
Cool.
That's good. And can I just ask another question that's very topical, and you probably expect it. And I know you can't say a lot about it, but the sevens.
Yep.
My understanding is that it is no more than we have simply rented FMG Stadium to the Sevens, which is going to be run by New Zealand. What was it? Rugby.
So
it's not the rugby union, is it?
Yes, it's a partnership.
Oh, it is
it's a joint venture between the New Zealand Rugby Union and 37 South Events Limited. Yep. Our role in the event is through the provision of the stadium, just as we provided for an All Blacks test, for example, or for the Warriors game last Friday evening. So, yeah, we're just basically doing a regular hire that we would always do. It's actually a standard hire contract that we have in place where all the on-costs are paid for by the client. The only thing is that our rental revenue for the space is zero rated in this instance, so we won't collect a hireage for the venue, but all other on-costs and so forth are met by the clients.
So there's no upside if it packs out to us, and there's no downside if there's no one buys a ticket.
Well, there's no upside in the accounts for H3. That's correct. But obviously there's an upside for the city in terms of activation and reputation.
So just to be clear, the hireage is zero, but they are paying for the costs of it. So that would be security things and those sort of issues.
That's right.
Okay, because we all still provide those things, do we?
What we'll do is, a part of our standard service, we sort of help with the subcontracting of those providers, cleaners, security staff and so forth, help with the various event management plans and so forth, but that all gets paid for by the joint venture.
Okay, so I've been telling people that we'll be getting, in my ignorance, that we'll be getting a rental for it. We won't be getting a rental for it.
No, we won't.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any further... Oh, sorry, there's a bloody stack of them. Rob.
Yeah, I just want to add a further question to Gary's on the revenue for the full year forecast. And I noticed on page 79, you're budgeting for just over 6 million, which is a little bit higher than the 5.9. How's the bottom line likely to fall? Because that doesn't appear to be covered in the chart there. We're budgeting for a $15.195 million loss for the year. Is that likely to be improved in terms of the higher revenue, or are we still on target to report that loss for the year?
I expect we'll report that loss. At an operating level, we expect to achieve, if not slightly exceed, our budget. The key driver for the loss at the bottom line is the depreciation level, which is dogging us quite badly. So.
I guess my question is around making sure that your revenue, the increased revenue, is in fact likely to filter right down to the bottom line in the sense that we're not buying in revenue at the sake of higher costs elsewhere, which will increase the final loss.
No, look, that's a very good point. If you actually look at that table to the financial summary at 2.1, and if you go halfway down the table to
which table?
The 2.1, which is the financial summary.
Yep.
And halfway down, you'll see the direct operating surplus deficit. At the moment, we have an operating deficit of around $90,000, and we are hoping to recoup that $90,000. But if you look further to the depreciation and amortisation, that's where we get into trouble.
So, okay. Sean, you quoted a variance from budget figure, is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
The actual, sorry, the actual is 3.3 million deficit.
Yeah. So you're not anticipating there'll be any change in terms of depreciation and finance costs and so forth?
No.
As a result of any revaluations that have occurred?
No, I don't think there'll be any revaluations this financial year.
Okay, thank you.
Martin.
Yes, I mean, this is obviously a financial report that, and probably some of the questions I'd ask would be more coming under the Community and Services Committee. Just first on the sevens, clearly notwithstanding the city is not financially liable, obviously you and a whole lot of people are going to be looking at how we leverage this event for broader purposes for the city, obviously with tourism and others.
Yes, that's correct. We have a fairly big workload ahead of ourselves with that. Prior to the media release yesterday, and you were in attendance, we had a lot of the various stakeholders from the city who will be quite actively engaged with us in terms of doing a lot of the work to both campaign and promote the event, but also to promote other things to do while you are here for that event. And it's fair to say, and he's ready for it, but the Hamilton Waikato Tourism, for example, know that we're going to be leaning on them pretty heavily to help us with that work, along with the Central Business District Association.
And if anyone was any doubt why you have a really good expressway and rail connection to Auckland, this does help with this event. As I understand, one of the critical things was our proximity to the Auckland and Tauranga markets.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Just changing the topic, just to the, I noticed the NZ Symphony Orchestra coming to Claudelands. Any feedback on the success of that concert, particularly in terms of, the acoustics?
Look, yes, I think I have mentioned that before. Look, they have done very well, probably better than we expected, and I'm trying to remember, but when the Symphony Orchestra first agreed to move into Claudelands, I think they said that they expected a 4 or a 3 out of 10 result in terms of sound. But they said to us after the first 2 concerts that they probably got a 6 or a 7. But it's still lacking a little bit, and I've been to the last 2 events there with the Symphony Orchestra, and it has actually been great, but not what they would ordinarily like. The next concert that's coming up with the Symphony Orchestra, we are, however, trialling a different format and layout in the arena. So if you have been to the concert, the stage was set back quite a way, and there are a lot of the audience were on the flat ground on seats. We're actually going to bring the stage much, much closer to the raked seating in the arena itself and see whether that makes a notable difference. So I guess what I'm saying is we're continually trying to squeeze that little bit of improvement where we can.
Because obviously in that interim between, the new Performing Arts Centre, but you're saying that it very much is, it's an option, not ideal, but you're doing your best. No,
yeah, absolutely. And they're very happy with what we've been able to achieve.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Paula.
Thank you. Just in respect to, we started this conversation when you gave us a update a couple of months ago about the business of H3. Just looking at the chart on page 83, the coloured one. it's really good that we're trending up. But just in terms of revenue versus the amount of time that the facilities are used versus the number of attendees, do you think we've got that as correct as we should have, the balance between... I mean, if you think conferences are 18% of the event revenue, they're only a fraction of the events, they're only 3%, which is quite small. So presumably, if you attract more conferences, it's all good news, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And at the end of the day, we are I'm quite pleased with how our utilisation levels have improved at Claudelands. But at the end of the day, we still have a lot of days that are free and a lot of times and specific days that are free. So we are not... we do not lack for supply to cater to new business. The question for us is, are we able to cater to new business at the right time and on the right day that they particularly want it? And we do have some pressure points, but all of those sectors we are driving hard in terms of growing the sectors, and the business event sector in particular, and as well as sort of being quite important to us revenue-wise as a proportion, it's really important to the city as well in terms of what it brings in terms of additional business, additional visitation to the city. So that remains a very, very important driver for us, without a doubt. So all of those sectors we are taking whatever business we can, whenever we can, wherever we can get it.
So supposing we wanted to drill down at some stage to the times that are free for different sectors. I mean, because there are always some of the business rooms every day. There's someone in some of the business rooms on most days, right?
And most days there's some rooms not being used as well. So and then there's the big auditorium itself, and various size and scale curtains and blocks off and things. So we can target. We target the market quite heavily, and we push the market hard, and certainly in Auckland and Wellington and elsewhere, and locally, of course. We have someone in Australia at the moment meeting with a lot of show promoters. The reality is we are targeting a range in the market really, really hard. The challenge is that we have to meet their schedule and their time frame. And so that's where we do get those peak periods at times. So no matter how hard we might push a date or how hard we might push a good arrangement for a client, if it doesn't suit their time, it can be very hard to shift them, especially if they're looking at us alongside other venues at the same time. So if someone is looking to bring a conference of, say, 300 people into town, the schedule in their annual calendar for that particular concert, they've said, right, it'll be this, or the conference, it'll be this week, and they'll then look around what are the options in terms of the various venues around the country, for example. And so that is our challenge. It's not always that easy to say, hey, look, I know you'd normally want to come here in May, but hey, come in August. Because of their own needs, it's really difficult. It's the same with touring shows, it's the same with exhibitions. There is a season for these things. If an overseas artist, for example, is coming to do a tour of New Zealand, we actually have to fit, New Zealand has to fit the schedule that they happen to be in Australia for, let alone Hamilton then having to fit the schedule that they're in New Zealand for. And so it does get quite challenging.
I can imagine it'd be complex. So how far in advance do people book in?
At the moment, we are noticing a very big lift in short notice bookings, particularly for business events. So we're getting quite a lot of short notice activity, but they are for the smaller meetings. If it's a big conference, I mean, we have a conference coming in with 1,500 people later this year, and they're going to be here for 4.5 days. That's been, we've had that in our system for 2 years in terms of a forward book. So it varies according to the organisation, the size, the scale, but we can be taking business at 2 or 3 days' notice, or we can be talking 2-3 years out. So it varies according to the organisation.
Okay, that's good. Has there any assessment being done on the economic returns of, say, a large conference of the talk you're talking, 4 days, lots of people, I mean, it would be hard to be exactly accurate, right? But you've got proportion staying in accommodation, you've got accommodation fully booked on occasion, like Novotel Ibis are often fully booked and things. Presumably they eat somewhere.
Yeah, look, they do. Look, there is generic information available through central government in terms of the research they do on the economic impact of conference goers, and it's, look, I forget the figure. It's around $350 spend per day for anyone from outside of town for a conference, but that's a very generic measure. And I think, as I've explained before, we have from time to time done some economic modelling or measurements, if you like, but at the risk of sounding a bit glib, it has been a little bit dirty and not that well structured, and to do a really proper assessment is very expensive, and we have tended not to use that, but have tended to rely on sort of more omnibus type things that have come through. There's a whole host of different types of methodology to measure this sort of thing, and they all have their nuances, if you like, and concerns. So there's no doubt from our perspective, and I do it very simplistically, is if we're generating a new visitor to stay a night, or however many nights they have, that's the measure. You know,
$150 per night. So you'd be able to notice those sort of trends around field days and things as well that have
the city absolutely does. I think the challenge you have, field days is massive. I mean, you imagine if Hamilton had and the Waikato had one more field day, it would be fantastic. It really would. But sometimes though for the city it's a bit challenging because they get used to it. And so it's year after year, so they sort of get used to it. It's when it's new things that come in that are interesting. But from my point of view, anything that is going to generate overnight stay, times however many people, times however many nights, is good business for the city.
And just my last comment, the farmers market going into that nice barn, and is it holding up its end in terms of?
Look, I think so. I think it's going okay.
Sorry, Paula. Just which one are you talking about?
I'm talking about the farmers market being relocated to that barn on the Claudelands Showgrounds area, which is really, is really a lovely venue.
Because there's still one on the a tiny one on River Road.
On the Sonning car park site. Yes. Look, the farmers market used to be at Sonning, moved to the racecourse for a while.
Just wasn't too sure which one you meant.
Came to us. So we understand they're getting around 1,000 people a weekend. And for us, it works well. It's great to use that space and that room. It's ideal. We have a very good arrangement with them, and that includes times when there might be a conflicting event on or something else happening. They will move away, and so they'll forego that space if we need it for commercial activity. So they moved over to the migrant centre last time, didn't they?
Yeah,
they did. So no, that's actually working very well, and we love the activation. It's great.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Paula. Mark.
Thanks, Gary. Just a couple of questions. I'm really interested in what you're saying about the symphony orchestra and how you're, moving around to adapt that kind of acoustic. How far off ideal is it getting? Because I noticed. Oh no, Kieran. Yeah, you answer that one first, please.
Look, I'm not an expert. I think you'd have to ask the symphony orchestra, the conductors, and the musicians how they feel.
Yeah.
I have to say that if you ask someone. And I did ask, the last concert I went to, I actually asked a number of people that when they were leaving, how they felt. And there was quite a variety of people in terms of, some thought it was actually great, some thought it was fine, some said, no, it's not right, whatever. So it's a tough judgment call.
Yeah.
I think if you are a symphony orchestra, they are always going to want a facility that delivers a 10 out of 10 experience. It's as simple as that. But they are very understanding and very accommodating. So
because they're still coming back, aren't they?
Yes, they are. They are, absolutely. And because they are in a larger room with its constraints, they're actually coming to Hamilton now with full noise, whereas before they were a restricted orchestra size because of those constraints of the stage house founders.
Because I noticed Mary Poppins, despite a lot of screaming wailing, is going to be here after all that?
Yes, it is. So that's coming up towards the end of the year, and that's going to be pretty exciting.
Yeah. Because I don't want to be mischievous or anything like that, but this is relieving the pressure that was coming up to build on new founders. So I'm just wondering if that's going to change the dynamic, or because we're not, those big acts we're not going to get. Oh, no, I'm curious, because yeah, okay, maybe slightly.
Well, look, first of all, with with Mary Poppins, with Hamilton Operatic, I mean, it's a great, I mean, they were terribly disrupted by the closure of Founders. And it really impacted on their organisation, without a doubt. It's great that they have now finally, and it took a long time between them and us to actually work out a way to try and make it work at the Claudelands Arena. And I think, and I don't think they'd mind me saying it, I think they had to get their head around it as well, because it was a huge paradigm shift.
Big time.
It is very much a trial. It is not an efficient event for us to hold in the arena, because the cost to us in terms of making the staging and everything else happening for that format of a show will be quite huge. And the rehearsal time and the setup time. Right. I will say that we are losing a degree of commercial revenue, but we did take the decision that we had to give it a go.
Right.
And we even have a couple of commercial users who are going to try and sneak in and out while the show is set up in the arena. We're just trying to find some ways to make it happen.
Like a rodeo.
Well, it's only going to beat $50 million.
Yeah, so we'll just see how we go. But look, it will be it'll be very interesting. It'll be interesting to see if the right atmosphere's there, how efficiently we can do it and they can do it.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how the audience feel. You know, after they've been and because a lot of the people will go a little bit cynical about the room. And some might be surprised and some might remain cynical, but we'll wait and see. And it'll be interesting to see how Hamilton Operatic feel after they've experienced it and done it. So, it'll be, because of the nature of that show, it'll be pretty exciting in that room, I suspect.
Yeah, cool. Okay, thank you. Just turning to the Sevens, just following up on, I think it was Gary's question earlier on. So the organisation's bringing the Sevens to Hamilton. They pay for all the clean-up and everything like that.
Yep.
Wear and tear on the stadium if it's damaged and that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, that's part of our normal arrangements. Yeah,
right,
that's so that's.
It's great. Well, well
there shouldn't. I mean, the stadium is I have to say it's pretty bulletproof. You know, it's you know, we've had a lot of events here with a lot of people and a lot of different circumstances, and it handles it pretty well.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you. That's all for me.
Okay, so just to be clear on the Sevens thing, sorry, there's no other questions, I don't think. The only loss to the city is the loss of revenue that would have, if someone was going to use it that weekend, but possibly no one was going to use it that weekend, is the loss of revenue that's roughly it.
Yeah, in theory, but we know, and I could say virtually guarantee 100% we wouldn't have had any revenue on that weekend at all.
Okay.
We struggle to get events in there. If I've had a question come through on my
Sorry,
text.
Sean, what is the weekend? Because the thing I got had XX February or something like that.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I should know the date.
Maybe you don't know.
3rd or 4th of February.
Early Feb.
Yeah.
Right.
So what I was just going to say, I've had a text come through saying what's next, and that's a good segue into that. I mean, what's next? We haven't had an outdoor concert at FMG Stadium for a number of years. So that's something we're working on because the outdoor concert touring circuits come up again. It was dying back for New Zealand for a while, but it seems to be coming back. So we've got things like that, and that's always going to time it for those times of the year when it's empty.
Does anyone here know anyone from NXS? Did you? Or can you give them a call? There hasn't been a decent band since the 80s, has there? Okay, Dave.
Just a quick question on the Sevens. Are the women's part of that event, like they are at some of the other World Sevens, you know, like 2 days before or the day before? Well, because I'm hoping there'll be a winning team from New Zealand there, you see.
I'm sorry, but I have a mental blank. The answer's no, but there is some discussions going on, I think. So can I come back to you on that?
Yeah.
Can I come back to you on that? But there has been some discussions about women's. Yeah.
And it is the Sevens, not the Eights.
It's the Sevens.
Did you see the New Zealand team got pinged the other day? Had an extra bloke on, can't even count. Okay, there are no more questions, I think. Is there any debate? All right, I'll move the resolution. that the Finance Committee received the report. Mallet. Oh, sorry, hasn't go. Oh, when did you push the button? Oh, all right. Okay, go ahead, James.
I just want to take this opportunity, really, and I can probably say it safely on regards to everybody here, but just to congratulate Sean and staff for the hard work and negotiations they've undertaken to secure the World Rugby Sevens event here in Hamilton. Look, it's really nice to prove certain people wrong at certain times. You know, to quote some individuals where they say Hamilton City Council, police and 60-year-old hand wringers will screw the event up. You know, let's get right behind this and let's prove the naysayers wrong and make the Hamilton leg of the Sevens a world-class event. I'm sure we can do that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you from a 50-year-old.
Okay. I'll move the recommendation that the Finance Committee receives the report. Oh, God. James, you've opened the bloody floodgates now. Everyone's going to have to do this because it's so we can get into the vibe of the thing. Here we go.
No, I'm not actually going to. No, I'm not going to speak to the Sevens. I'm going to speak more generically than that. Although, you know, I think any event that we can attract to the city is good for the city, especially if it isn't at the cost of the ratepayers. But I would just like to say that I do think that what you're doing around managing Claudelands in the last couple of years has been awesome to see the trend going up. And I'd like to think that we can further refine that as we go forward to fill up that free space and to make the most of the people who bring the biggest revenue in, which will be about attracting conferences the way I see it. So every conference that we can attract, and I know that it's sometimes 2 or 3 years out that you're pitching for international conferences, as a good thing. So I think the community who've had some anxieties about the performance of Claudelands should be proud of the asset that it is and the fact that we are trending to making it a very valuable community asset. I'm sure it will be. Thank you.
Okay, I'll try again. Is there any more commentary? Okay, I'll move the recommendation that the Finance Committee receive the report. Mallet, Casson, those in favour, those against, carried. Thank you. Item 10, page 87. The Finance Committee draft 2017 Schedule of Reports. I think Leanne talks to this riveting read.
No, I'll talk to this.
David's got it.
It is a riveting read, so I'll take the report as read and just happy to take questions.
No questions or no debate. Thank you. Pascoe, Mallet. Those in favour, those against, carried. Thank you. Now, the late report. This one's pretty meaty. So we're on to item 11, which is not in your agendas, but is in the report, which hopefully everyone got. Dave will have got it on the internet, I hope. Can someone please give Dave a paper one so he can do his, I don't want that, I don't want that. Okay, do you want to put, people who want a paper one, can you just put your hand up and Jeff is going to do it.
11 is the 12 comes before, because it was a late. Just to clarify Councillor Bunting's question, it is item 12. It's taken ahead of item 11 because it came after, and item 11 takes us into public excluded. Okay. Well.
And this is the agenda we all approved at the start of the game. Right. Away you go, Murray.
So, good afternoon, everyone. I have Tal Lawrence here, who is seconded to the City Development team at the moment and is helping us with the project management aspects and some of the project assurance steps associated with this work. So as you're aware, back in February we had a slip occur on the bank of the Waikato River near Hamilton Gardens. This resulted in a very significant risk to the bulk water mains supplying the eastern side of the city. So the site is still very dynamic and challenging. However, we do have some really good contractors, consultants and project managers working to assist with managing those risks and proceeding with works. So as you're aware, the weather over the past few months has not been particularly kind to us in that particular area, and at times this has significantly hampered the progress that we've been able to achieve. However, we have achieved some good progress, and at this point we've achieved a level of stability at the site where the work completed to date and the risk to the water supply is at a manageable level. So in the April report that I brought to you, we advised that due to the emergency nature of the works being undertaken, as well as the sensitive environment that the slip has occurred in, there was a risk of additional cost and time delays, and I guess this has proved to really be the case. The original estimates of 1.88 million referenced in the April report were based on conceptual costs for the initially proposed rock filling methodology. This methodology has since been ruled out just on the basis that the volume of rock fill that would have been required would have extended right out into the Waikato River and obviously caused navigation issues.
Dam, wouldn't it?
Pretty much. So that's been ruled out, and a lot of work's been put into actually reviewing some of the alternative solutions that could be implemented. And this has involved the contractor, Brian Perry Civil. So as a result of all that further assessment, we've come to the conclusion that soil nailing is now the preferred methodology, and we are confident that this presents the best value for money over time to manage risks to an acceptable level. But it's important to note that the works do remain very sensitive to weather and river levels, and so the risks of further erosion, cost and time delays, especially heading into the winter months, are still present. So just one point before I open up to questions. There are a couple of minor errors in the table on page 6 on section 47. So it's just basically in the third column at the bottom, the total should actually read $3.84 million rather than 3.8 million. And the figure in the fourth
just slowly, not Murray.
So the third column.
3,840,000 should it be?
Yes, that's right. And in the last column, that should be 800,000, not 840,000. So it doesn't change the overall project cost that is being proposed there. And on that note, I'll happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Murray. Mark.
Thanks, Murray, and thanks to you and your team for all the brilliant work you've done up to date. It's been fantastic. I am worried though, and I just wonder if we need to rule this out yet. I'm worried, like, for example, on point 39, we sort of say we really don't know what the root cause is. It's erosion. I mean, there's no such thing as derosion. It all goes outwards, and we're seeing right down the river. And I'm really worried that this is going to be an ongoing thing, or the risk is quite incremental. At what point do we start talking about a bridge? At what point do we start talking about taking it out of the river and out of the water and over the top? Especially considering the fact that just a few hundred metres down the road, we're going to be talking about one of the biggest bridges we've ever built across to Peacocks. Do we start considering diverting it round and incorporating with that bridge, thereby bringing that bridge further and looking at some opportunities that way? Is that how, have you absolutely discounted going over the river?
At this stage, that was one of the alternative solutions that was looked at. However, there would still need to be significant subsidence works done in the meantime. So it would have actually been even further costs, as it would have been quite expensive to re sort of pipe as such in that direction. But it is something that we're considering for the future in terms of future-proofing the resilience of the supply as well. So, and obviously that's still to be further defined.
Yeah,
yes, that's correct. There's a perfect opportunity there.
Well, what I'm just wondering is if we're kind of looking at co-funding and all sorts of options for that bridge in itself. Would this still cost an extra 4.6 million if we looked a bit further into the future and said, okay, we're going to get it up to speed to get us until the bridge is ready, and then we went across the bridge? Would we have to spend this amount of money to get it just up and going safely for a couple of years, for example?
I guess it all depends on the level of risk that you really want to carry. So at the moment, even though it is at a manageable risk. There is still a risk to the water supply to the eastern side of the city. So if you wanted to continue carrying that risk for the next 2 to 3 years, that's quite a significant period of time to be carrying the risk to influencing or impacting on 27,000 homes potentially.
Exactly.
So I think that it is the best option at the moment is to proceed with this expenditure.
So what was the cheapest amount you could have got it across the river for without having to necessarily put a bridge on it, for example? Because I'm just thinking, and I'm not an engineer by any means, but I'm thinking of the Te Awa cycle bridge. They're building it for about $1 million. I know, I'm surprised. But they're doing it for about $1 million. Now, surely to get a big pipe across the river wouldn't be a great deal more than that?
Thanks. Look, it's a good question. The costs are more difficult to allocate to just one option or the other because the subsidence event has created quite an unstable riverbank, which is...
It's got to be fixed anyway, right?
It's got to be fixed anyway.
Yeah.
It's got to be held together in the meantime until an alternative, any alternative arrangement could be put in place. It doesn't seem like very far down the road that the bridge is going, but when you consider the properties that it's got to go through, the reconfiguration within the treatment plant and the network on the northern side of the river, it is complex and it comes with a number of consequential costs which will become part of our bigger program of works. But to bring those forward, you're opening a can of worms that doesn't really have an end point when you're trying to accelerate it.
Okay, I understand.
So it's a difficult question to ask because what sort of bridge do you build? Do you try and bring forward small aspects and that aren't sacrificial costs? And it becomes quite expensive to chase that.
And yet you're talking about no endpoint. We don't know how far this erosion is going to happen either, do we?
We've managed to secure the site fairly well. Considering we're in the middle of winter, we are now implementing and testing the soil nails this week. And so while we can't predict another cyclone or an earthquake or river levels, we're much more comfortable this week than we were, say, 2 weeks ago, in terms of having confidence around what that total outturn cost would be. We're carrying a reasonable level of contingency in our costs for those kind of events because we know they're possible. But we're much more confident in what we've got now.
Is there a way for us to find out what you're talking about? It being quite a complex operation going that way through the over to Peacock's Bridge. Is there a way of us finding out what that would involve down the track? Because we haven't ruled it out completely yet, have we?
Look, it's not ruled out completely, and in fact I'm also working on the Hamilton Ring Road project, and within that we are relocating several hundred metres of trunk water main, and we're in conversations now to understand what that should be put back in at a bigger size so that it forms part of this network. That alone relocates around 600 or 700 metres of pipe, and the logistics of that relocation in Cobham Drive is a big piece of work, but will form part of this eventual resilient network. That's not saying that this particular piece of the network would come out of service once that alternative is in place, but it's the reliance on it for its defined life expectancy can change, and so it could be taken in and out of service more often. Therefore, you might actually get more life out of the asset under the river. So, it's not really something to be just thrown away. It is still a useful asset.
Because the capacity going through there will change, won't it, once the Rototuna reservoir gets up and going as well, won't it? Is that right? Will that affect what goes through that pipe, or is that a bit...
over time, the flows or the consumption of Hamilton residents will just slowly increase, and there will be more reliance, I guess, on that eastern bulk main.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Paula.
So my question, am I up already? I wasn't way down the list. My question was...
Some people get scared and just jump on.
Okay. You probably answered. Well, you did answer.
They heard the genius of Mark's and they thought, I can't catch much after that.
This is kind of relevant to something we mentioned earlier, which is the potential under watershed emergency works. So what are we doing in here? Because they don't fund the renewal of assets per se, but they do fund extraordinary erosion events. Not all of it, but they enter into an agreement with. So are we having a conversation with the region? Given this, it was caused by an earthquake and heavy weather on top.
And I guess that until we get the outcome of the ACOM investigation report into the cause, I guess a lot of those discussions are on hold. So we're keeping Michelle Archer at WRC updated with what's happening. So they're very much aware of what we're doing in that space. But it really does depend on what comes from the ACOM report.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. Just anyone else? Just the nails into the, and I wouldn't, like Mark, I'm not an engineer. Just this nail technology, where's it been tried before? Where's it worked and tried before?
It's quite a common technology that's used in a lot of, I guess, in road overpasses and the like. So you'll often see shotcrete or concrete type surface with sort of regular little sort of knobs on the surface, and that's
and the knobs are the nails.
Pretty much, yeah. So it's just an anchoring system. It's a steel rod that's drilled through the shotcrete and into more stable material at the back.
Is that what we did with the stuff in front of the Tainui?
Yes, I believe so.
Was that nail fixing, was it?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's worked okay?
It's a very effective, well-used technology.
So it's not a brand new technology? And
no.
Okay. Thank you. Okie dokie. Do we have any further questions? Any debate? Okay, I'll move the recommendation. James seconding it. Those in favour, those against, carried. Thank you. Okay, I'll now move the resolution. What do I formally have to say? Just move the resolution to move into confidential. And I need to move that, and I need a seconder, I think. Mallet, Casson, those in favour, those against, carry.